and welcome to the Unreal Engine News and Community Spotlight. First things first today, we're going to be talking about the NVIDIA Edge program. We actually announced our first round of winners a couple weeks ago. If you're not familiar with the NVIDIA Edge program, we actually partnered with NVIDIA to highlight teams or individuals that are doing really outstanding work in either games or visualizations, and we want to award them with GTX 1080 Ti's so they have the top-of-the-line hardware to enable them to keep working on really amazing stuff. So our first winner was actually Victor Oman for his Swedish Mechs project. He's just created a lot of really outstanding robots and mechanical creatures that he's put out in these fields or scenes, and they just look so stunning, and we're really impressed with all the work he's doing and excited to hopefully enable him to keep on making this really fantastic artwork. Our second individual, or pair of guys, is actually the Planetrism VR. So it's this alien colonization game that they're working on. It looks outstanding, and for two devs making this giant environment, we're super impressed. So great job, guys, and we're really looking forward to seeing what else you're doing. And our third and final NVIDIA Edge winner for July is AFun Interactive with their Kia Stinger VR project. It just looks outstanding. It's this car that they've put into a virtual environment, and they're really emphasizing a realistic experience, and we're looking forward to seeing what else they're doing, and hopefully they keep up the amazing work. So great job, everybody. We really want to encourage you to submit for next month, so if you go to Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, give a shout out to Unreal Engine and NVIDIA Game Dev or NVIDIA Developer. It's all covered in our NVIDIA Edge blog, so make sure to submit, and maybe you too can win some swanky hardware. SIGGRAPH. So many things happened at SIGGRAPH. We actually had our first ever SIGGRAPH user group. It was on the Monday night. It was super jam-packed. There was a 100-minute showcase with over 20 presenters from a number of different industries, and you can actually watch the video of the whole event on our blog. So if you go check it out, see what else we were up to there. We debuted Datasmith, there was Ghost Paint VR, graffiti walls, we had virtual face of Mike Seymour, and Chris Evans did a really outstanding version of Michelangelo's David in VR. So read all about it. For our community spotlight, our next up is our community spotlight. We always recognize a number of our weekly karma earners on Answer Hub. So these folks are answering questions for us and jumping in and just really helping support the community. And we would like to give thanks. So thank you to Ninjin, Remy D, Speedy37, Ben Vlodky, Noctmare, Vrixo, Redbox, Shadow River, Death Ray, and Pure Pop. You guys rock my socks, and just keep it up. So for our community spotlight, the first project we'd like to highlight is Project Genom. So it's a sci-fi MMORPG, and you get to participate in the battle for the survival of humankind. So you're wandering around, you've got this planet that you're like, hey, I love this planet. But other people want it too, because it's so awesome. So you gotta duke it out with some aliens, and you're running around in space trying to collect your resources and fight these really incredible monsters. It just looks really cool, and they're combining a number of different gameplay elements that it just looks like it's gonna be a whole lot of fun. So shout out to the guys making Project Genom. This motion capture project. It's really awesome that people are diving in and using these new technologies to dive in and experiment and just see what we can do with things nowadays. It's wild what you can do. You can capture the motion of someone's face without markers, and people are experimenting and playing with it. So I want to give you a shout out. It looks really good, and keep playing with technology. And our third and final spotlight for this week is the Maelstrom Thunderous Fantasy Naval Combat. If you ever wanted to captain your own warship, and you can do it either single player or multiplayer, battle royale, and you can duke it out with other ships. Fire cannons, get close, board them, ram them, wreck it. I don't know about you, but I always wanted to be a pirate and break stuff, especially with ships. So looks awesome. They've got a Kickstarter campaign going on right now. We'll put a link in the chat for you to go support them if you also want to captain your own warship. So thank you for joining us for this week's Unreal Engine News and Community Spotlight. Welcome to this week's Unreal Engine community live stream. I'm Amanda Bott, your host. I have with me Max Chin, our lead cinematics engineer, and joining us on the couch is Andrew Rodham, our senior tools programmer, and they're going to talk about some updates in Sequencer with 4.17. So welcome on the stream, guys. Thanks for joining.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I just wanted to first give a shout out to everybody in the community for giving us feedback on AnswerHub, UDN, all sorts of forums and stuff. It's been really eye-opening to get feedback, and we really value that and use that to drive some of our milestones. So it's been a while since I've been on the stream, so I wanted to give you guys an update with Sequencer. We launched Sequencer actually not last GDC, but GDC 2016 with the Senua demo that we worked on with Ninja Theory. And at the time, we wanted to introduce a new UI for cinematics, better workflows, shot-based workflows, a cinematic camera, a sequence recorder, which allows you to record gameplay and turn those into sequencer tracks. And so since then, we've worked on a few other projects for SIGGRAPH 2016. Mm-hmm. That was the human race collaboration we did with the Mill. Used a lot of sequencer. That's where we introduced some of the EXR playback, frame accurate playback, which I'll touch on a bit later in the stream. And then also for GDC, SIGGRAPH 2017, the Fortnite trailer. And so what we're going to dive into today is the Fortnite trailer, cinematic trailer, It's about a 3-minute long piece that you might have seen on YouTube. And we really tried to capture, visual effects workflows, game engine technology, try to marry them together and create a nice animated short.
It came out really great. Like, we've had lots of wonderful reception on it, and I was super impressed with just the quality, and it all running in real time is just amazing. So
Yeah, it was a huge endeavor, and that's partly what I want to show here today is all the nitty-gritties of it. I mean, it looks good playing it back real time. It played back for the first time at the Computer Animation Festival at SIGGRAPH.
Oh, really?
Real time, along with The Human Race. Those are the first two that had actually been played back real time. Everything up to that point had been, just movies. So, but I really wanted to dive into the details here. A lot of people have been asking questions about how it was put together. Sequencer's gone through a lot of work to get to this point, and there's a lot of intricate details that you need to consider when you're putting together such a long piece with a big team of artists.
Gotcha.
So yeah, let's just dive straight into the trailer right here. So what I'm showing you here is the launch trailer map, and at the bottom here I've got Sequencer opened up to the cinematic, and on the right here you see it's called, this is the launch trailer. So this is Sequencer, and immediately what you see here is the shots track. So the shots track here, you see a collection of bins, containers, and these are 6 containers that capture essentially shots. But in actuality here we have what we call at this top level launch trailer is the master sequence. And the master sequence contains a collection of sequences or beats. And so here we got the OP, DB, MT, HF, so on sequence. If I dive in further, so I can double click onto one of these shots, one of these containers, I'll see the pieces of that sequence. So another shots track here, 1 level deep down, and here I've got 3 containers, and these are the actual shots that compose this OP sequence. I can dive even further, and that takes me to the actual tracks. So here you'll see all the complexities of what make up this shot. And just to reiterate, so right now we're in the OP shot 10 here, take 1, which belongs to the OP sequence. So if I navigate back up, I'll be at the OP sequence, navigate all the way back up, I'll be at the launch trailer, the whole entire trailer. So that's how the shots are essentially divided up. Now let's kind of take a look at what happens on disk or in the content browser. So if I navigate to the asset that contains this launch trailer, so anytime you're looking at Sequencer here, this belongs to one particular asset. So I can click on the asset, and that takes me to the content browser here. Let's scale this up a little bit. You can see. All right. So what we've really tried to do here is to mimic what you see in Sequencer. So in Sequencer, you see the shots. You can dive deep into the hierarchy of the sequence and shots. And in the content browser, we've mimicked the same structure. So here's the launch trailer. Here are the folders for all those sequences. So in this case, if I go into OP, now if I hit the find asset, that takes me to the OP sequence, which is in the OP folder. And if I can also dive into that folder, and that's the folder for the OP shot 10, shot 20, shot 30. And other stuff in here, there's other folders for, here you see Alembic files and FBX files. So, but essentially, this mimics what you see in Sequencer. You don't have to do it this way, but this is one, I think, pretty good way to organize what you have in a consistent, logical way.
Well, and do you have a number of people like working on the same thing? So if it wasn't organized in that way, then people would really struggle with finding the right assets and combining those. So
yeah, that's one of the big reasons for doing it this way. And that's a great point of, sequencer was designed to allow multiple artists to work on the entire cinematic all at once. So when you look at these shots, each time you dive in, this is one file, and one person could be checked, having this file checked out, and one person could have this shot checked out. So that's a great way to divide up the work. So now that we've seen the shot structure, let's take a look at what's in these shots. So if I look at the map, and let's pull open the levels browser. This map's divided into quite a few sublevels. So here you see visible, a bunch of sublevels. They all have the prefix E and V for environment, so they're pretty much visible the entire time. Some more sublevels. This goes pretty deep. And I just want to hone in on this section here. So these are the primary sublevels for each of the sequences. Again, they correspond to the shots that you've seen. The OP sequence has the OP Cine sublevel. So everything that's relevant for the OP sequence is contained in the OP sublevel. Same with DB. Let me pop back up so you can remember what that looks like. Right, so OP, DB, this pretty much maps up the same way. So now, let's take a look. You'll notice that the OP sequence is visible while I'm scrubbing in the OP sequence. If I go to the DB sequence becomes visible, OP becomes invisible. Pretty straightforward and obvious. Now, let's figure out how that happens. Yeah, let's put this.
Is it good?
Okay, good enough on the side here. All right, so at the top level, the launch trailer, you'll see a track called Level Visibility. Level Visibility's got sections for stuff it wants to make visible and hidden. A lot of stuff hidden. So all these, pretty much everything in there except for all the environments. So pretty much everything is hidden by the master sequence, the launch trailer. So including, let's see, in this case, let's go back to the OP sequence. So in this case, the OP sequence shows that it's visible, but the master sequence says, no, let's turn it off. So that's, just want to point out, this is how they're set up here, and you can drag and drop those sublevels into that section. So a master sequence says, turn it off. Let's dive into the OP sequence here and see what's going on. So it also has a level visibility track and a visible section, and it says, let's turn on, make these visible, OP Cine, OP lighting. So that's really how it works. The OP sequence takes over and says, let's make them visible.
So these sub ones override that master.
Yeah, and that's actually a good point. So we have two tracks, and they both want to control the same thing. So you might be asking why, which one takes priority. So in this case, by default, tracks in a lower level take precedence, and that's totally controllable. So in this case, if we have a shot OP10, and if that had another level visibility track that would hide the OP sequence, the OP Cine, then it would definitely not be visible. So let's go back to the OP, and I just want to point out that actually the launch trailer, point out that if I right-click on that particular shot, the way this is configurable is through this property called the hierarchical bias. So this property you can see this property on any of these shot containers. So in this case, the value is 100. It defaults to 100. So let's take, for example, the level visibility here with OP Cine. So at the master level, the hierarchical bias is 0, and they add. So the bias of this track is 0. If I go into the OP sequence, it's going to add the hierarchical bias of that shot. So the bias for this track is 100, so the 100 wins out. If I had another one down in that level, that would add up and the one inside OP10 shot would win. Of course, that's controllable, like I mentioned. So if you take a look at OP Cine, let's actually pull up to this level here. So if I did want it to actually be hidden, I can right click on here, set this value to -100 or whatever, and when I reevaluate, it should be hidden. So that's how that works. But by default, tracks in shots lower in the level have priority. So that's how we control visibility from sequence to sequence. Now let's take a look at the actual shots themselves and what's inside of them. So let me pull into OP sequence here. So here I have 3 shots. Let's go into the first. Actually, maybe this is a little bit better. It's a little bit harder to see though, a little dark. It's pretty dark there. Let me find another shot that might have a better view of things. Let's pull back to here. Okay. All right, so let's take a look at these shots here and what's actually in these shots. Let's take a look at DE. So diving into here. So each shot has a camera, and that's put into this folder called CineCamera, and a bunch of tracks here for different properties. There's been tutorials on these. So there's a camera anim track, transform. So this holds the movement of this camera. I think that's about it for this camera. So one thing I want to point out too, though, is for each of the shots, you need a camera for the animation or whatever it is that you want on that camera, but you also need a camera cuts track. And I've seen some posts about the confusion about needing the camera cut track. So that's something we'll look into. So the camera cut track really tells this shot which camera to switch to, and in this case, it'll be this Cine camera actor here. So if we wanted to, we could set keyframes for switching to different cameras within this shot. But in this case, for the Fortnite trailer, we've done one long camera cut per track. So in addition to the cameras, we've got characters. Each of the characters has broken down transform and an animation clip. The animation clip pretty much runs the length of this shot. So there's one per one skeletal animation clip per shot for each of the characters. Now then, pulling down even further, let's take a look at what else is here. So we got some props, objects, the animate. What else is in here? So some particles. And let me see what else I want to look for. Right. Let's talk about lighting. So now that you've seen, this is how these are the pieces. These are the tracks that make up the shot. There's some specific stuff that we've done for lights in particular. So for lights, a lot of times you want the whole sequence to have a certain set of lights, and we've done that with if I go back up to the DE sequence, you'll see there's a sublevel called DE lighting. So when this sequence gets turned on, the DE lighting sublevel is enabled, and all the lights that are consistent across this sequence are enabled. But a lot of times you want very specific things happening lighting-wise for your shot. So that can be done too with the sublevel system. But then if you think about this, you'd end up with a sublevel per shot for lights. And across this trailer of 120 shots or so, that's at least 120 sublevels with just lights in them, maybe 1 or 2 or 3 lights in each one. So that's one way of working. You could do that. But in this case, we decided to try something a little bit different. So let me pull into this one shot here, and you'll see some spawnables. So in this case, the spawnable light here. So let me pull open my modes browser here. So what we want to do is try to eliminate, the sheer number of sublevels just for specific shot-based lighting. So, I can actually close this up. Just trying to find some real estate here. Let's close that up. Okay.
It's
All
hard
right.
to do it on one screen, isn't it?
Yeah, but this will be okay. So say for example, this shot needs a light. I could simply drag this light into the world, but then this light will actually appear for all the shots, and we don't really want that in this case. So what I can do is drag this point light into sequencer, and if I scroll down to where it exists, there it goes. You'll see that light. It spawned right in front of the camera, and let me point this out too. There's a preference actually. Edit preferences. All right, here we go. Spawn position. So it actually defaults to the origin when you drag it into sequencer, but in this case I turned it on to place in front of the camera. So there, it's right in front of the camera. It gets spawned. You see a little lightning bolt in that icon there. And let me see here. It should also show up in the... Yeah, there we go. Also shows up in the outliner. So that's a new feature of 4.17 is the sequencer spawnables now show up in the world outliner. And the reason for that is pretty obvious, I think. I mean, you want to be able to select spawnables that sequencer makes and also just possessables and go to the details panel and change their intensity on both of them at the same time.
Mm. Real quick, they're asking how do you get to view all the commands in the cinematic preview window?
And view all the commands in the cinematic preview window.
Is that all the playback? Was that not a...
Oh,
there
yeah, so
previously?
by default, let me turn this back on, show toolbar. By default, you're probably looking at something like this. One of the first things we did was to add a new viewport type. So under perspective, cinematic viewport, that turns it on to this thing. Let me turn on game view, get rid of all that stuff. So with this, we really wanted to put in, an easy way to scrub the timeline, hit play and all that stuff, and also give you information about what shot, what frame you're on, what camera you're on. There's also some tools here to enable some grid patterns. There you go. So all this stuff, that's all there.
Nice.
And I turn this off. There's also a toggle to turn off the toolbar. I just wanted to clean up my space a little bit so I can see more of the picture. Yeah, so getting back to the spawnable. Right, what I wanted to point out is that the way that spawnable works is that once I'm let me actually turn off the camera, because if I scrub outside of this shot right now, I'll basically view a different part, the shots previous and next. But I want to turn that off for a minute so I can see what's going on in the world here. Okay, so I'm in this particular shot, DE20, and I've created a spawnable light, and I'm not viewing through the camera, so it's just kind of a God's eye view here. So if I'm scrubbing through the shot between the green and the red markers, then the light's there. If I scrub out, light goes away. Comes back in, goes out, in and out. And you see it's red, meaning like when I'm outside the shot, it's going to go away. So sequencer is going to delete it. So that's what a spawnable is. It only exists for the duration of the shot. There's ways to make it persist, but in this case, by default, you pretty much just want it specifically for this shot. So thing I want to point out, though, and this works pretty well for all the shots that we have, doesn't pollute the list of sublevels, and they don't. Not only does it not pollute the list of sublevels, they only exist for the shot. They don't bleed into the effect of the light. Doesn't bleed into other shots. So that's a great way to use spawnables. Of course, you can use spawnables for any other actor. You can spawn, props, skeletal meshes, all that stuff. So you'll want to use those when you want something very specific to a level sequence, and then have it disappear afterwards.
Do you ever encounter a delay when spawning those during a particular shot? Is it best to spawn early?
Yeah, you can actually do that, but we didn't need to for this trailer. We actually had some optimizations in there that'll come out in 4.17, I believe. Some things like when it spawned, it actually renames the label and causes some hiccups there. But I think we addressed most of those issues.
Okay, very cool.
And also to point out, you can convert the spawnable to a possessable. Becomes it goes into the current level, and then it's still controlled by sequencer. But that's one way you can convert back and forth. You can convert an object to a possessable and then into a spawnable as well. Mm-hmm. I should point out, though, that there are drawbacks to using spawnables. So say you have a light and you really like its effect in this one shot, and you also want it in another shot. So that's an issue there. We haven't implemented copying and pasting of spawnables, so that's one possibility we could introduce. But then also, if you copy and paste, then you maybe want, you change the intensity on one, maybe you want the other shot to have the same. So then you have to keep managing that as well. So in those cases, you might want to go back to thinking, hey, well, is this light actually more useful in the whole entire sequence, not just the shot? So that's where we actually do have that's where you would maybe take that spawnable light and push it into the DE lighting sublevel. So a lot of things to consider there in terms of, where does this specific light or object live for this one shot? Okay, so, right, okay. So, let me pull back to the launch trailer here. Okay, so next thing I want to talk about is actually more about lights. So we talked about how if there's tracks in a stack in the master sequence, if there's a level visibility track in the master sequence, one in the sequence below it, one in the shot below it, how does that work in terms of which one wins out? We said that the one at the lowest level wins out. So that's a vertical priority ordering. The next thing I want to talk about is horizontally what happens. So, for example, let's go into this OP shot here. So let's throw that light back, another light back in here, but this time let's put it into the world. So now that it's in the world, I want this shot to take control of it and change the intensity. So you can drag that light into sequencer. And that should create a track for it. So you'll notice that this is not a spawnable. It doesn't have a lightning bolt. It's just got tracks to possess that light. Actually, before I do that, though, let me go ahead and delete this. Before I do this, I want to actually turn this light off. So let's set it to 0. Okay, now let's bring it back in. And let's set its intensity to 1,000. Okay, there we go. So I want to do the same thing. Let's pull out of this camera. Let's take a look at this light. And if I scrub before the shot, after the shot, you'll see the light turns on and off. So why does it do that? Well, maybe it's obvious, but what happens is when the shot gets turned on, the intensity turns it on to 1,000. And then when you evaluate outside of the shot, so this is the shot border right here. When you evaluate outside of the shot, then the shot turns off. So this is what we call the when finished state. So if I right click on this track here, you'll see in the properties, when finished is set to restore state. So it's basically trying to return itself to before it animated the value. So in this case, it would return it back to 0. That's the default state of how all the tracks work. They try to return themselves to the original value. If I wanted to, though, I could set it to keep state. So right click here, keep state. Now when I scrub out, it's going to keep its state. Now why is this important? Oh, light color. Let me set it back to restore state. So I just mentioned that we had looked at the vertical slice. Now this is more horizontal. So what happens if this light, which exists in the world and can be controlled by multiple sequences, multiple shots, what happens if the next shot has a track for it or doesn't have a track for it? Well, obviously it's next, so the next shot will take priority. But for example, if the next shot does not have a track for this light, then setting this to keep state would keep the intensity of this light into the next shot, which might be what you want, but if you're working with shots and are trying to nail down, what's going on in this particular shot, you don't want stuff to pollute the shot afterwards. So in particular, what's going on here is that this light, let me pull out of here. This light is turned on in intensity for this shot. If it kept state, it would persist into the next shot. And there's the potential that, one person is working on shot 30, another person is working on shot 20. If this light keeps state, that'll totally screw up and pollute shot 30, because the guy working on 30 wouldn't know that the guy working on 20 had adjusted a light. So that's one of the important aspects of how sequencer divides up and allows you to control. For this shot container, everything is localized, can be localized to this shot. Now, there's cases where you want to keep state. I mean, if you want to blend into a game, you might want the pose to keep state. So I noticed that there's been questions about that in the past, and we've definitely fixed a lot of bugs for 4.17 to iron all this out, and definitely tried to prove it out with the Fortnite trailer. Keep state, restore state. How am I doing on time? Okay. Last thing I want to point out is just a few little things that we've added to the user interface. There's now a new sequence column. Let me sort this up. So maybe I'll pull back out to here. How's that? Okay. Okay. So there's a new sequence column, and this really helps us debug a lot of times. So I was talking about an object having the possibility that an object can be controlled by many, many sequences. And a lot of times we're going in to figure out, why is this particular light a certain color and intensity? Well, it's because this shot this level sequence is controlling it, this one as well, and this one and this one. So this really helps us narrow down where to look for the track that's controlling these objects. And we've also explored and talked about possibly ordering. So right now this is not an ordered list. It doesn't order by priority, by restore state, by keep state, all that stuff. So that's something that we want to explore in the future, just more introspective tools. Why is this light intensity 10 and which level sequence is the one that's actually controlling it. A few other things I want to mention that we added for the Fortnite trailer work. right here. So I think a number of questions have been asked that I've seen on Answer Hub about construction scripts and scrubbing through, not in just an editor. So we have, I think it's in here. Let's see. Oh, right. Okay, here we go. So in this particular blueprint, we have one called eye highlight controls. There we go. And this blueprint on construction script adjusts the eye highlight controls. So we wanted a way to preview that as we're scrubbing in sequencer, but construction scripts can be pretty heavy as you're reevaluating them. So we added a toggle. Here we go. In this blueprint, there's a new toggle here called Run Construction Script in Sequencer, and it's turned on. And then also you need to enable it in sequencer as well. So turn that on, make sure. So when that's on, should be running the construction. Let's set some keyframes. It's kind of hard to see here, I guess. Oh, there we go. So there's an eye highlight. So without those toggles turned on, you wouldn't see these construction scripts running as I'm scrubbing. So this gives you a better preview of what's going on instead of having to pie and hop back and forth. Let's see, what else do I have? Oh, right. Okay. One last thing I wanted to mention is, and I don't have anything to demo with right now at this moment, but another topic that's come up in the past is shot cuts and, what happens at that shot frame cut. And, my movie's not rendering out, what I'm seeing. One thing we did for the shots in movie rendering is if you hit the movie button to render out the whole sequence, this has always been has been here for a while. The delay before the warm up, I think it defaults to 5 maybe. So what that controls is, in the past, has always been load up this entire sequence, hold on frame 0, let post-process effects settle, let particles fire, all that stuff, and then start recording. But we found that to be a problem because we actually want it to hold on each of the shots. Let me, for example, I think in this one of these shots in here. Oh, right. Okay, in this shot here, she's firing, and I'm not in simulate right now, so you're not seeing the particles fire. But in this shot here, we really want it to warm up on the beginning of this frame, so that we can continue recording. So I believe this is going to be coming out in 4.18. It's not available in 4.17 yet, but in 4.18, once you set this delay before warm up, it's actually going to stop at each of the shots and wait 3 seconds, 4 seconds, whatever, let things settle. And that was critical for us to render out all these shots to have the correct settling at the first frame. I think that's most of what I wanted to get into with the Fortnite trailer itself. The next thing we wanted to look over is the new blending stuff for 4.17. So let me pull that over, this project here. Andrew, you there still?
Yeah, I'm still here.
All right.
It's been so quiet.
I'm going to let Andrew kind of take over, and I'll drive as he's talking over.
Yeah, so these are some new features that are available in 4.17, as Max said. And really, there's quite a few different things that we're going to show. The first one that he's showing here is blending between different animations just by overlapping sections. So here we've got 2 animations from the awesome Mixamo anim pack that you can get on the marketplace. And you can see Max is just dragging the second first one. And Sequencer is now just gracefully blending between those 2 animations for us without having to go and edit any keyframes or anything like that. So that's a full way of mixing animations together. You'll also see that this is enabled on transform tracks as well. So you can define your two transform sections as specific points in space. Drag those two sections over the top of each other, and it will automatically interpolate between one of those transforms to the other transform. And that's, as you can see, visualized by this linear blend curve. Do you want to have a go, Max, at changing that to a different type of easing?
Yep. Let's do.
So here you can see there's loads of different easing options here. And as you play back, you can then see the difference in those interpolations. So it's a really nice, efficient way of just trying out different easing methods and seeing what works and what doesn't without having to dive into your transform tracks and drag keys around and manipulate tangents and things like that. So that's a really cool thing. You also may have noticed that this second transform track, when Max is hovering over it, it says relative on it. This is a new feature that's available in 4.17 as well, that we can now define transform tracks and actually any other numeric property in Sequencer as relative to its initial position. So when Sequencer first encounters that property, it's going to cache the value of it and use any relative sections that it finds as relative to that initial property. So here he's got two transform tracks, and you can easily sort of drag one over the other, and it will blend between this absolute position in the first section to the relative position in the second section. And as you can see, that blends nice and smoothly between those two transforms. And like I say, this is available on not just transforms, but also any sort of float properties. So camera properties, for instance, you can do FOV pulls and things like that, focal length, all of that sort of stuff, light colors. Colors are supported as well. So that's absolute and relative. And there's also additive blend mode that we'll go into a little bit later on. So that's the animation tools that are improved here. Do you want to dive into the, just open a new level, Max?
Yeah, I want to show also that you can drag these, and these are all customizable functions, right?
Yeah.
Tool tip.
Yeah, so there's some built-in functions there. So those are most of the sort of standard things that people who are familiar with CSS animations and that sort of thing, those built-in easing functions are available, but you can also define your own. If you like, if you just hover over the method, you can define a custom curve asset, or also you can even implement your own blueprint interface to define your own easing function if you want something completely crazy. So yeah, one other thing we've done is we've added the ability to mask out certain parts of transforms. So this is an example where sometimes you might want to play back an animation on an object while it's also being animated by something else. Maybe you've got some game code moving it as well, and you want to sort of do some relative or some additive animation based on its current position, but only in a certain axis, or you want to maybe just scale it and without affecting its translation. So here we've got quite a simple sequence that's just got a spawnable cube that Max demonstrated earlier, how to create spawnables. And really the only thing on here is a transform track, and you can see that it's only animating the Z component of the location. So Sequencer is not going to touch any of the other parts of that transform. So if you just play that back, Max, you see it drops from the relative position in space to an absolute position of 70 units. So this is using, again, a relative section on the left and an absolute section on the right. So it's going to, when we play this back, it's going to pick up whatever position it is in the world and make sure that it interpolates smoothly down to the Z position 70. So here's a spawnable, but maybe we want to play this back on a few other things. If you just hit pi real quick, Max.
Yep. Oh, sorry.
You can see that we've got some game code running here, which is just doing some basic animation. So we've got one that's spinning around in a circle and one that's rotating. So one is this is just some basic blueprint code. And you can see that X and Y component of a transform is being changed on one and just the rotation on the other. If we just stop pi right now, and then select the animation, the level sequence, and just drop in the details and set that to autoplay, what we've actually done is set up this sequence with some binding overrides. So if you, and then when we play, you can see that it's actually playing back the sequence on everything in the level. Where have they gone?
Don't worry about that.
So it's playing back them all, and they're all just interpolating to the same position in world space. And that's using these binding overrides. So you can specify them on the details panel here.
Yep.
So we're actually overriding this spawnable and saying, hey, instead of spawning that object and interpolating that one, why don't you animate this other object instead?
Sorry about that. Right.
Yeah, so we're taking hold of this cube multiple times and saying animate all of these different objects using the tracks that you previously defined there. So it's not actually spawning that spawnable at all, because we've overridden it with these 8 other components. So that's quite a cool way that you can author a sort of a template component and play it back on a different object in the world if you want to. Mm-hmm. And like I say, you can use any amount of relative or additive or absolute blending here.
Cool.
Okay, should we show how this also can affect UMG as well?
Yep.
So sequencer is also embedded into UMG. It will use the same backend for evaluating widget animations. So if you just play this level, there's just a sort of a basic front end which shows these icons and these little sort of rollover animations. And people that have tried to author this sort of stuff in UMG before might have found it quite difficult, because sometimes you can use ping pong animations perhaps. So you use the same animation but play it back in reverse. Things like that. So there's some tricks you can do to get around, but quite often with rollover animations and things like this, you have this problem where, oh, I just moved the mouse out of the widget, and now I've just moved it back in again, and the animation can snap, or you have to sort of play the same animation from its current position. But because we have these relative sections now, all of these hover animations are actually defined from relative positions to absolute positions. So it doesn't matter if a previous animation only got halfway through. If you then hover back over the element, it's going to possess that animation at whatever point it finished and just interpolate to the absolute position that it wants to.
Cool.
So yeah, that allows us to do different, rather than having to do the same hover and unhover animation, we can actually have different hover and unhover animations, as you can see here. So there's a few different things going on. It's built up of a transform that scales from a relative to an absolute position. And it's also got an additive section right at the bottom there that just gives it a little scale pop when it gets to the end of the animation. It pops the scale a little bit to just give it a little bit of life. So those are some cool ways that you can sort of just try things out, particularly in UMG, without having to, manually mess around with keyframes. You can sort of try out, well, what does it look like if we put an additive section here and pop this thing a little bit bigger? Oh, that doesn't work. You can just delete the section and it doesn't affect the rest of the sort of base animation.
Yeah,
and you can expect to see.
Sorry, I was just going to say it makes it look like you can really get some very, different style of animations much easier and much quicker to iterate on those and try some different things than if you were keyframing it all through it.
Yeah, that's right. Originally, this was something that was asked for from some of our internal teams who are working on the control rig, which was demoed. It's still an experimental, but was demoed at GDC this year. And these are tools that will be applicable there as well, where you're authoring an animation on a character rig, And you might want to try out a different animation where, maybe this bone needs to just lift up a little bit or move to the right a little bit. And so you can tweak animations that way without ever affecting the base pose of the animation. And if it doesn't work, you can just delete that section or change the way it interpolates without affecting the rest of it.
Nice.
Cool. So I think that's about everything we wanted to show here.
Yep. Awesome.
That's all you've got. We did have a few questions.
I got one more thing, actually.
Okay.
I know we released it in 4.17, and we had some release notes on it. Just wanted to show very quickly, though, the image plate plugin and how to use it, because we don't have official documentation yet. So if you do go into Edit Plugins, search for image plate. There you go. Image plate. Make sure you enable that. It'll restart. Once that's there, let's go ahead and make an image plate. Add new, media, image plate file sequence. So this is where you specify what are the files on disk that you want it to read. In this case, I've got a directory full of EXR images. Set that up. I'm not sure if I have, right. Right, fill all that out. And then let's put in an image plate itself, an actor itself. So I'm just dragging that in. Pulling this up, sorry. oh no. Actually, let me kind of hit in here. What was that? Oh, weird. Okay. I'm not sure what happened there. Let's see. That's weird. Okay.
The real storm is coming.
Let me rebuild that. So image, where are we? Right. Okay. Set the plate. All right, so there's our image plate. I'm going to drag in a camera as well. So if we put the plate on the camera, get over here. All right, so what I just did is parented the plate to the camera so that it follows the camera. And one cool characteristic of the plate is that if you pull it in and out, it will grow bigger and smaller so that it maintains the framing inside that camera. So now what do you do with this? You can create a level sequence or put the image plate inside sequencer, create an image plate track, and assign it to the image plate file sequence. That's the one with the EXRs that I pointed to before. So there you go. That's my sequence, and you'll see it playing back. And then, so that's where it ends and goes back to the original texture. So that's just a quick and dirty. How do you create an image plate plugin component with the image plate file sequence? That's all I got.
Yeah. All right. So, got a few questions.
Okay.
So real quickly, even based on your image plate, how does that correlate to like game FPS? Is it
Right.
you know?
So how does that correlate? Well, it plays back based on the level sequence. So that if the level sequence is set to a particular frame rate, it's basically going to play at the frame rate of the level sequence.
Okay.
So, and on disk, what I've got, let me try to navigate to it. Where did I put this? on disk, what I have, I think this is probably pretty obvious, but what I have on disk is basically in this directory, this set of images and this naming convention. 001.exr, 002, 3, 4, 5. Obvious.
Mm-hmm.
And then you set the frame rate on the actual file sequence asset.
Right.
So if you jump to that, you can see this one's set to 24 FPS.
Nice.
Which matches the level sequence, but they can mismatch and sequencer will just remap time.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then they're asking, is there any file type restrictions on that image plate, or?
It supports anything that our internal image library supports. So
Okay.
most standard image texture formats are supported: JPEG, bitmap, PNG, all that sort of thing.
Cool.
And obviously, if you stream in EXRs, then you're going to get that as an HDR texture in the GPU, which is sort of a standard format.
Okay.
Oh, let me point this out too. This little chevron. So that's correlated with this little guy here, pre-roll time. So I guess that default on image plates, that defaults to half a second. And so what should be happening in this time period here is preloading the plate sequence.
Okay.
Yeah, so if you have pretty large image frames, if you've got 4K plates or whatever, then you can set a pre-roll time and it will start to preload those. So when it comes to actually cut, then it will already have the GPU texture ready to display.
All right. Do you know if we're planning on releasing the Fortnite trailer project itself?
I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know. I would hope we have some kind of structure like this that we can release, but again, these are obviously, you take them as examples and formulate your own pipelines and for the next project we'll probably use some of these rules, but we could they're pretty variable and malleable, as you've seen, like with all the properties that we try to expose. You can hopefully take this as an example and figure out what's right for your production.
Right. Okay. Do you know, they're actually wondering, they really love the UI sequencer sample that you had, and is it possible to get a sample project of that maybe that they could look at and play with?
UI sequencer?
Andrew? I think, or the UMG, I'm sorry.
Oh, the UMG stuff.
Yeah.
I think we're planning on putting together some tutorials and demo content of this stuff that should be released at some point. So yeah, I'm sure we'll get something together soon for the community to try out.
Nice.
Yeah, we'll look into that. Okay. That's a
Well,
good idea.
I wanted to thank you both for coming on the stream.
Yep.
You actually in person and Andrew all the way in the UK. It's got to be getting pretty late there for you, huh?
It's not too bad. It's
Yeah,
just gone
thanks
8.
for
Oh,
staying
okay.
up.
So thank you both very much. I feel like we've learned a lot just diving in, and I know there's so much more to it, but every little bit is helpful, and we really appreciate you guys coming out.
Yeah, no problem. It's fun.
And then again, just a couple of things. 4.17.1, the hotfix is out, so if you have updated to 4.17, make sure to get that. It has some nice crash fixes and things like that. We're going to have some teams out at DevCom and Gamescom, so if you're in Cologne, Germany, and want to go say hi to folks, come hang out, see us, visit. Again, submit your project to the NVIDIA Edge program. Next week's stream is actually going to be getting started with Sequencer with Wes Bunn, so you'll get to dive in a little more on a tutorial walkthrough of some of these elements. And, I have a feedback survey that I'm going to drop in chat, and just give us your feedback. We love to hear from you. And as always, follow us on Twitch, Twitter, Facebook, and have a good week, guys. Thank you for coming.